For about a week before our planned vacation to the Oregon coast, I was wondering if there was a project I could do that would incorporate being at the beach. And the night before we were going to leave, it finally hit me. I should make feet, or something that I can leave footprints in the sand. So I was wondering how quickly I could model feet to cut on the CNC machine. I really wouldn't be able to just model them straight up, like model feet. I would have to use some kind of shortcut. So I was poking around looking for height maps of feet, which I really didn't think would exist, but I figured I'd give it a try. And what I found and remembered is that when you're born, the hospital oftentimes will take a footprint of the newborn baby. And I found a bunch of those, and they actually make a really good grayscale height map for a foot. And the really young foot actually, when scaled up, looks rather monstrous and Bigfoot-esque. So I used some random person's feet to make the model to cut the wooden shoes that I was going to make. I made both a roughing pass with a 1/2-inch bit and a finishing pass with a 1/4-inch bit. And I found a piece of Sequoia that's been sitting next to the table saw for the last year or more that really needs to just get used for something. So I cut it down to a size that's a little bit closer to what I needed. And I attached it to the CNC table. Now the first thing to do was to surface one side of the piece of wood. And I got most of the way through, and I decided my bit wasn't quite low enough. There was a spot on the wood that the bit wasn't reaching, so I did a second pass. And cleaned that up. Now I can flip the piece of wood over, and this will now sit nice and flat on the CNC bed. And I can start the roughing pass for the feet. So this is doing contours. It's basically clearing out each level and giving me some steps on the vertical parts. I'm using a 1/2-inch bit for this. Now I got about halfway through, and it looked like my bit wasn't in the collet tight enough, and it was actually sliding down and giving me a deeper cut than I was supposed to have. So I stopped the process and reattached the bit and reran the code. So it cut air for a while, and it finished up the roughing pass. Now I started the finishing pass, and it did seem like it was taking off a lot of material. And I got up towards the toe end of the foot, and the bit got stuck. I think I was asking my 1/4-inch bit to take off too much, and it was having to deal with too much height in the feet. The finishing bit I have doesn't have a whole lot of height for cutting. So what I ended up doing was to make a second finishing pass with my 1/2-inch bit and squish the height of the feet. So basically scale the z-axis by 60%, because I really didn't need that much height. That much of the foot wasn't going to sink into the sand. And in doing this sort of pre-finishing finish pass, it cut the pieces in a similar way to my 1/4-inch bit. So now the 1/4-inch bit was just taking off the surface and would just add the detail. So this worked. With a scaled down Z height and a third pass, it cut the feet just fine. And that's what the feet look like. And I can take these off of the table. Now I need to cut the feet out of the wood. What I thought is I needed some kind of edge or flange to the foot if I'm going to make it into a shoe. So I left a little bit of extra around the foot as I cut them out. This could have been done on the CNC, but I was in kind of a rush. I did all of this one evening and then a little bit of the morning the next day before we left for our trip. And I cleaned up the edge, sort of the convex parts on the disc sander and the concave parts on the spindle sander. Then it was time to pack everything up that I would need on our trip to finish up this project. And it was time to go. And we got to the coast just fine. Now, what I needed to do at this point was to thread some string into the feet. That would allow me to attach them to my shoes and my feet so that I could wear them like a shoe. So I traced my sandals onto the wood and tried to figure out what was actually going to work. I couldn't make any fatal mistakes at this point. Tried it first with 3 holes on each side, and that seemed like it would work, but it'd probably work better with a few more holes. So I added 2 more and got to 5, and that would allow me to sort of weave the rope through the foot and around my shoe. And for the second one, it was easy. I just traced the holes from the first foot, and things got a little faster. Then I could put finish on. I just grabbed a can of polyurethane before I left the shop. I figured it would be good if the wood was protected from the wet sand a little bit. That was really the reasoning for the finish. And I let those dry overnight. Then the next morning I could thread up the feet and see if this was going to actually work. I kind of wondered if I had done the string to make the foot more like a slipper and not used my sandals, and whether that would have worked better. It might have been a little simpler, and it might have been a little simpler to get the feet on and off. The way that I ended up doing it did seem a little bit complicated, but it worked for the most part. Then we were off to the beach, and they seemed to work pretty well. I had wished I had had a bigger piece of wood to start with and to have made bigger feet, but I think they wouldn't have sunk into the sand enough, as these were right about at the limit of what I could make a footprint with. And I tried walking and running and pushing really hard into the sand, and it seemed to work. There weren't very many people at the beach to fool with the feet, which was kind of the whole point. We did find a really nice print that we made a plaster cast of. I thought that would be fun to do with the kids, and it would bring up the memory of Bigfoot a little bit, like we'd found something in the sand that we wanted to save. It took a lot more plaster than I thought. It took our whole box of plaster. I had the kids think about what they could make in the sand that we could pour the extra plaster into. And then we ended up not having any extra plaster. But we made a nice foot. Then we played on the beach for a little bit while the foot hardened up. The tide was coming in, so we built a little island on the beach and watched the waves break it. I didn't realize it while we were doing this, but I can see it in the time lapse now, where we would walk around and leave footprints. Then the waves would wash them away, and we'd leave more footprints, and then the waves would wash them away. Kind of interesting. I was showing Calvin how it gets warm when it cures. I thought it was going to be really fragile, but it's actually pretty solid. And the print came out really nice. It looks better than the castings of the Bigfoot prints that you see online. Those kind of look fake, like someone carved a foot and then made a casting of it. Whereas since this is based on a real foot, I think it looks a little more realistic. I think also these just look like footprints. And if I was to do this again, I think I would do a completely different kind of print, like a dinosaur print or a huge dog print or something like that. Something that's really different. Because if you walk down to the beach and see these, it just looks like footprints in the sand. They're just subtly a little bit too big. So we brought our casting home and tried to clean a little more of the sand off, but pretty much the sand had fallen off at this point. But the print turned out really nice. I like how it looks. Like I kind of want to make a frame for it, like it's a piece of art or something. And we need to frame it or something, or throw it out. Thanks for watching.